Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inform New Hampshire. My name is Dean. This is Pat, our guest today, on my right, and Richie, my co-host, on the right, further right, my right, your left. We are broadcasting at about 5 p.m. on February 6th, 2018, and we are on Manchester Cable Channel 23. We also have a YouTube channel called Inform New Hampshire. Please feel free to stop by, watch our show. If you're watching YouTube right now, please click the like button. That helps us out, as well as if you subscribe. So we want to get started today with some news and information. We're going to talk about some current affairs, of course, but we always start out with just a little piece on Jerry Delemus and then also the National Liberty Line. So, Richie, you want to talk about that?
Yes, Jerry Delemus. We'd still like to ask you to keep him in your prayers, him and Sue. Also, if you can contribute to the free jerrydelemus.com, his legal aid fund, we'd appreciate that. You can find it on the internet. Keep in mind that another month, Jerry will be in prison for 2 years for, I don't want to say a crime he didn't commit, because he didn't commit a crime. He didn't do anything other than stand up to the swamp dwellers that Trump is trying to get rid of in Washington. And he did what we all should be doing, and that's step out of his comfort zone to stand up to the tyrannical government that we have. So please, if you can, see it in your heart to send some money to him. Free jerrydelemus.com. That's JERRYDELEMUS. Also, I wanted to mention that the National Liberty Alliance has had, they have a pretty outstanding and momentous task ahead of them. They want to print 80,000 books, and I believe they're about 75 or 80 pages apiece, and send them to all the sheriffs in the United States, 25 copies to each county. The purpose of that is to let the sheriffs know what their job is, because the sheriffs don't know. Unfortunately, they've been conditioned, and we'll talk about this a little next week, but they've been conditioned to do what they stepped into the job and people before them did. That doesn't make it right. It simply means that they've been conditioned to do it, like we all have. So if 20,000 people in America, which is not a lot of people out of the 311 million Americans, 20,000 people send a one-time $5 donation, it'll cover the cost of printing and mailing those books. So I'm asking people to be a part of that so that we can get this thing underway and hopefully start to change things, because ignorance is the problem in America and education is the remedy. So please consider that. And also, in order for it to get to 20,000 people, you have to share this video, or at least share and talk to your friends, neighbors, and family. So thank you for that. Back to you, Dean, or Jeff.
All right. Yeah, just before we get started, I just want to mention that last week we talked about this epic battle we are in between good and evil. Oftentimes we refer to the white hats versus the black hats in the CIA and the FBI and in government. And this all started a very, very long time ago. So the asymmetrical warfare, if you will, against the United States has been going on since its inception, really. The British never really gave up, but one of the significant landmark points in our history is around 1912 and 1913, when the international banking cartel basically bought the United States Incorporated, and then they stuck the federal dollar in there, so they took control of our currency, and they did so unlawfully. And shortly after that, I'm going to read you a letter that Richie just gave me, and this is from Colonel Edward Mandell House, and he was a close friend and confidant to President Woodrow Wilson. He was also a self-proclaimed communist. And so what you're going to hear is the attitude and the context for which the elite at that time pretty much were swimming in. And so it's the swimming in the swamp that Trump talks about now. These are the swamp creatures of old from 100 years ago.
These are swamp pollywogs.
So
Back then, yeah.
Now they're bullfrogs.
but this is very telling, and it's so appropriate. I mean, I probably should read this on every show just so you guys have a context of what we're up against. But all right, so here he is. Very soon, every American will be required to register their biological property in a national system designed to keep part of this is cut off. Keep track of the people, and that will operate under the ancient system of pledging. So when he's talking about biological property, he's talking about your children. And the system for that he spoke of, the national system, of course, is a birth certificate system. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our security as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Do you have your copy of this?
Jeez, I don't think that I do.
Because the edges are cut off of this thing, and I'm having.
Oh, maybe this one. Yeah, there you go. That'll do it.
Thank you.
Is that better?
Yeah, the edges are cut off, and I
Okay.
can't tell what the words are.
Let me see that one, Pat, please.
Technical difficulty here, folks. We're working it out, though. We have a solution. All right, so Edward Mendel House. Very soon. Oh, I don't have the whole thing. Do you have a second page?
That's it right there. That's what I have. Just that.
Oh, yeah, give me that
Want
back.
that
I'm probably going to need it. I don't think this is the whole thing. All right. All right, so very soon every American will be required to register their biological property, that's you and your children, in a national system designed to keep track of the people, and that will operate under an ancient system of pledging. By such methodology, we can compel people to submit to our agenda, which will affect our society as a chargeback for our fiat paper currency. Every American will be forced to register or suffer being able to work and earn a living. In other words, if you don't register, you don't get to work and earn a living. Where have you heard that before? That's called Social Security. They will be our chattels, property, and we will hold the security interest over them forever. By operation of the law merchant under the scheme of secured transactions, Americans, by unknowingly or unwittingly delivering the bills of lading birth certificate to us, will be rendered bankrupt and insolvent, secured by their pledges. So in other words, they're playing a secret game here with their document world, where they are pretending that we are contracting with them when in fact these documents don't meet the necessities of a contract, meaning we didn't know they were scamming us and they're defrauding us. Americans, I'm catching up here. They will be stripped of their rights and given a commercial something designed to make us a profit, and they will be none the wiser. For not one man in a million could ever figure out our plans, and if accidentally one or two figure it out, we will have an arsenal of plausible deniability. After all, this is the only logical way to fund government, by floating liens and debt to the registrants in the form of benefits and privileges. This will inevitably leap to us huge profits beyond our wildest expectations, and leave every American a contributor or to this fraud, which we all social insurance. Without realizing it, every American will insure us for any loss we may incur, and in this manner, every American will unknowingly be our servant, however begrudgingly. The people will become helpless and without any sense of hope, their redemption, and we will employ the high office of the presidency of our dummy corporation to foment this something against America. So this is interesting because it lays out the very sophisticated scheme behind the scenes that Richie and I have been talking about for 2 years on this show, which is the whole birth certificate fraud, the contracting fraud, the currency fraud, and just a whole host of other ways that they defraud us unknowingly. And they've been siphoning off our wealth the entire time, and they've been controlling us the entire time.
Well, Colonel House is not a real colonel. They just call him the colonel.
They do? Is that right?
Like he worked for Kentucky Fried Chicken or something.
So he wanted to feel good about himself, so he adopted
He
a
wrote
title.
a book called Philip Drew, Administrator, and he was an advisor to Woodrow Wilson and also Franklin Delano Roosevelt. So by the time of the Great Depression, by 33, that begins to change where your birth certificate is going to be no longer registered with the churches, but it's going to be taken over as a state function. So they eventually got their wishes, I guess.
Keep in mind, that was 100 years ago, Pat, too. Imagine how far they've come since then. Those were the plans of 100 years ago.
Yeah.
Now with the technology, they've buried us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, but he's an admitted Marxist right in that book, Philip Drew, Administrator. If you can get a copy of it, but it's out of print. But I think there are probably a few that people have as collector's items. That's about it.
Sorry about that copy, Dean.
No, I know I struggled through reading it too, so it's something to look up, though. It's on the internet. Colonel, what is it? Wendell?
Edward Mandel House.
Yeah.
Colonel Edward Mandel House.
Yeah.
It is just very potent in revealing who they are and what they're up to with regards to this country and their control of it. They are the old swamp creatures, and the new swamp creatures are still at it. So we talked last week about the epic battle raging, and we talked about Q-Anon, which is a recent, as of September, October, posting on 4chan of a what we now know as military intelligence coming out of the White House and giving us clues as to what's going on in this battle. So if you're not aware of this, you're missing out on an epic battle, which actually has been going on for decades. But we are at the precipice, so to speak, of transformational change in this country, and that transformational change could have gone either way. But the fact that we, the American people, elected Donald Trump, gave us a foothold in the powers of control, as well as the opportunity to turn this ship around, so to speak, so that we wouldn't be plunged into a hot tyranny, which most of these criminals write about, and they savor the fact that they're involved in it, and they're at the the positions of power that are running this country into the ground. So,
Just the beginnings of an epic, massive battle, one of the biggest the world's ever seen. I mean, it's huge, and depending upon how it goes, it can work out for the positive. It can work out so that there is liberty and freedom, and people have a decent life worldwide, because it's international in scope. It's massive. If it goes badly, then you're going to enter into a dark period of night like the world has never seen. So I would say this to anybody watching this, that you have to realize that years from now, your kids, your grandchildren, they're going to look at you when they start to look at this massive multi-layered event. They're going to look at you and they're going to ask you what you did for this country and for liberty and for freedom. It's going to be a massive issue. Because more and more people are coming on board, and you see more and more people on the internet, and more people having meetings on getting this country on the right course and supporting Donald Trump. But it's a massive issue. You can see this whole thing too playing out in other parts of the world, all over Europe, particularly in Russia. And you watch that this media here, which is still controlled by those people, by those elites, they have never told the truth a single day in their life. But especially on the issue of Russia, they need to have that enemy. And you could see another Russian jet was shot down over in Syria.
Yep.
And once again, they push for this conflict with a major power.
World War III, yeah.
It's a frightening thing, because if you look at what's happened in the last few years, you have to go back into history a little bit, and you'd have to look at Russia where it fell apart under Gorbachev. And you look at the changes that came in. Those people were promised all sorts of things by this government. And when you look at what happened, the reality is nothing was down on paper, and that you had financial forces from the West and from the United States go into Russia, and they literally pillaged that country for years. And what you had was transnational corporations sucking out all the valuable materials out of there, the oil and resources, taking over anything of value, factories, any available capital they had for those factories. They were like vultures descending on a wounded animal. And this is where Putin came in, and he was on a quirk, I think, picked because he's simply a very, very loyal guy who had supported another politician that was under fire. Yeltsin found that out, brought him in, and he watched this. And you can see that he typically is characterized as a KGB guy, and he's like a black ops guy. If you look at him, the reality is he's a reformer within the KGB, which is he was in. He was not a popular guy. He was seen as an outsider. His job was more of being a recruiter than probably anything. But as he ascended into power, he looked at what was being done to his nation, and he eventually got to the point where they got Russia out of debt by pushing gas out through the Ukraine, and then he took these oligarchs, of which there were 8, and he purged them from his country. So he's the first guy, really, to drain a swamp. And you can see at that point that all of this lambasting of Russia as a still an evil empire, and Putin as a hardcore KGB guy, that really starts with the media, because he's thrown these people out, and he's tried to bring that country up to the point where they're open for business. They can do something.
Yep.
And you could see Donald Trump now in the United States is doing the same thing. So
Yep.
I don't doubt that in the future you're going to see the two countries probably come together in a closer relationship, because it would make an enormous difference. I think the best possible natural ally you could have would be
We
the
already
Russians.
have a close relationship with Russia, with our military and our scientists, and I don't know any others, but there's a lot of collaboration that goes on already.
Mhm.
It's the government aspect that's combative and that sort of thing. But
Well, here's the thing.
we work with them on space technology. We work with
Right.
them on all kinds of stuff.
We didn't. Why do you think we walked away from that space station? No, there's a reason for it.
What is it?
It's not that they're our enemy. It's that with the technology's already shared. It's already, what is done is done.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be, you don't have to be sleeping with the people, pardon the analogy, but
Right.
that's the reason why. It wasn't because bad Russians, it wasn't that at all. We shared all this technology with them.
But the elites,
There's a good reason for it. Let me just make
Good.
one point, Pat, and that is, because you started talking about it, and in case the people at home don't know this, the size of what's going on in Washington is epic. I don't know, you used the word before, both you guys,
Yep.
but it's not just in Washington. What's going on is on an international scale. That's why it's the biggest thing to ever hit planet Earth, as far as I'm concerned. And you have to know this because you're involved in this process. It's time for you to step out of your comfort zone. And I'm not talking about doing anything radical or crazy, but take a stand on the side of right and understand what's going on. Start learning and understanding. Don't watch your mainstream TV. It's owned by the deep state, by these people that want to harm us. And you can find that out easily enough. I just wanted to make that comment anyway.
if you look what's going on, you've got globalist elites that are in a war with anybody that's a patriotic nationalist. And the nationalism that's springing forth in Russia and in the United States, in attempting to come forth in countries like France, that's really a survival instinct. And they are dead set bent on destroying the concept of the nation state. And that basically is what Putin is doing. And Putin is basically saying that people in the United States have got to strive to understand Russia. That typically, I mean, think about Hillary Clinton. Who would you think that she could understand? What could she understand outside of how much money she can stick in the back of her elastic pants? Almost nothing at all. You think about this, that he's asking you basically to try to understand that Russia it's another country with a different history, with a whole set of different experiences. They're not going to be exactly the same as the United States, but there's no reason that they can't be respected as a national entity and stay within their own zone. And the United States do the same. And that's what a lot of this is about. A lot of Russians like Americans. A lot of Russians actually, they love America, but they loathe the elite that run this nation. They loathe the elites in particular all the way through
Well,
Europe.
we have something in common then, because so do I.
Absolutely, that's huge. That's huge.
They're at least informed about it. The people of our country aren't even all that informed that it's going on. But
Well, it's like
Elsewhere they
it's
are.
like H.L. Mencken said. He said, "Never underestimate the ignorance of the American people." That you got a percentage
Sad.
that are cut off and they've been processed. It's like they pick on these kids, millennials, and that, and they say they can't do this, they can't do that, and they're attached simply to these things. But they've been processed like that, and they're processed like that for a reason.
yeah,
and it's gone on for a long time.
Keep them dumb and
Keep them
dumb and hungry.
down,
What did
down.
Hillary say?
Keep them dumb and down on the farm.
She said it about the blacks. Keep them dumb and hungry and something else. So they're uninformed.
An interesting guy to look at that's analyzed all of this on the Russian side is Alexander Dugin, D-U-G-I-N, not to be confused with Alexander Dolgun, who wrote a book on Siberia called Up from the Ice. But Dugin he's a philosopher and an intellectual. He's been involved in anti-communist, and he's been referred to as the brain of Putin, which I think he isn't literally the brain of Putin, but he gives him a lot of information, and he's a great guy for somebody to pull up and to get an idea of what's going on
All good leaders
inside
have
of Russia.
good advisors, yeah.
But he will tell you that if you look at the United States, the same forces that were present in Russia prior to that 1917 revolution are present right here, right now,
Yep.
in this country. That demonic element, the attack on the family, the attack on traditional religion, the attack on Christianity, said those things are very, very strong, and they should not be underestimated. And they're seeking to do the same thing in the United States that was done to his country. So he's a key guy to really pull up, and you can learn a lot from him.
You know, you were mentioning the ignorance of the American people, and I have a little story about that for myself, and that is knowing that the memo that had gotten released by the Intelligence Committee last week. I was looking for it on TV. Now I have cable, but I have it narrowed down to. I really just wanted the Wi-Fi, but I have 10 free channels on my cable. So at 3 p.m. I'm looking for the release of the memo, and I just wanted to check the news because I had it online, but I wanted to see what the news was saying about it. Well, of course, I couldn't get any news till 5 p.m. or 6 p.m. or whatever it was. So by that time, I was surfing through the channels that I had, looking at the news channels, finding plenty of time being spent on the weather or a murder or something like that, but I only heard like 30 seconds about this memo, and this is like the biggest news that our country could have had at that moment in time. And they spent 30 seconds, and they talked about it as though it was that pesky memo that you might have heard of, and they didn't have anything to say about it. So that's the level of, that's their sin of omission, that they want to keep you stupid, and they want to keep you uninformed.
Right.
And so it's oftentimes far more egregious, the news they're not giving you, than it is the fake news that they are giving you. Although they do take some awards on fake news too. So
You got more freedom in Russia right now in their media and in terms of carrying on a conversation on key issues than you do in this country. I'll give you an example. November, this past 2017 was the 100th anniversary of the Bolshevik Revolution. And you look at how that was treated under Putin. Those people had discussions. Some were pro-communist, others were totally anti-communist, and others took a third position that there was some good and some bad that came out of that. And that was discussed all the way through their educational system. And Putin has made it mandatory now that within their schools, their high schools, their version of the high school, that they read the Gulag Archipelago by Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Yep.
Besides opening hundreds and hundreds of churches all over Russia. So you really have to pay attention. You've got to be careful about the people they put forward as conservatives in this nation, because this goes back to when I was a kid, when they called William F. Buckley a conservative, which he was not. There's absolutely no way that he was. But they can massage people into thinking that you have somebody in your corner, and the reality is you don't. You think about Rush Limbaugh, you think about Hannity, you think about Glenn Beck, you think about Ben Shapiro,
Mark
you
Levin.
think Mark Levin.
Yeah, another one.
All I can think about with Mark Levin is Mini-Me, right? When Paul Begala, they both have these huge heads, and Begala has Levin in his arms, he's shaking them back and forth like this, and Levin's going, Article 5 convention, Daddy. And they're all saying the same thing. We want an Article 5 convention, right? Which we won't control. And Trump can come in like a surgeon, and he can cut open the entire body politic and pull out all of this infection, all right, that's pervasive all the way through the country. And if they succeed in having an Article 5 convention and they bring in the Constitution of the new states, guess what?
It's over
You haven't
for us.
achieved anything.
It's
all
over
done.
for us,
It's
yeah.
all done. So you really, really have to watch him. You watch the same thing with Hannity, where he comes out and he's always mentioning, it's always a jibe at the end of the show towards Putin, towards Russia. I don't think that he's the big hero that people think he is. This stuff is a tidal wave, and we all know it. And they have to come out and explain some of these things now, which they should have done years ago. So they're a controlled opposition, I think, and you really have to watch out.
Well, the only people who benefit from a Article 5 convention, and just so you know, Article 5 convention is a convention to rewrite or amend the Constitution. So who benefits from that? Everybody who can't stand the Constitution because they are so limited by it. And so, unfortunately, that's not even true at the moment because they just trample on it anyway because they're not really under, our government is currently not operating under the Constitution. They have their own, just like they swindled you into giving up your freedom, the ownership of your own body and your children with the birth certificate, they've also swindled you out of your country, and they're operating under a false identity, basically. So anyway, the benefit of an Article 5 convention is for the criminals, because they don't want to be limited by, and in truth, they really just want to reconstruct the minds of the American people so that it completes the process of takeover of our country, letting you know and changing the rules so that you can no longer complain and whine about the rules that they're breaking. So,
And if you had multiple constitutions that are completed or near completion, at least three, and which they began in the later 30s. Of course, the Russians in 36 had the Stalin Constitution, and all those guys were saying, we have our rights to this and that, even when they're standing at an execution pit. If Stalin finds out you violate the Constitution, it's over. But these guys do have a thing called the Constitution of the New States, and it would be one that's positive law, where you're guaranteed all of these different rights, and it would fit right in very well with young people, millennials, that are already talking about a guaranteed, weekly or monthly income, a guaranteed this and that material type
guaranteed
thing.
health
So
care, guaranteed,
in '74, Nelson Rockefeller walked out on the Senate floor and he called for an open convention for and he got booed down. And he was one of the primary proponents of this, constitutional changes.
But
You will never control it.
the last time they had the convention, well, not the last time, but 1787, when they had the Constitutional Convention, it was to amend the Articles of Confederation.
Right.
But because the delegates, and this is where Congress comes into play, they determine where the vote is, with the states or with the delegates from the states. Now, just hear me out, too. If it's with the delegates that are in the state and not going back to the legislatures, per se, all they got to do, someone like Soros goes in, throws $1 million down, and says, give them all the food and booze they want, get them drunk. And they change the entire Constitution, and they ratify it. What are you going to do about it? Congress authorized it. This is hypothetical, by the way.
right.
But what are you going to do about it? Because that's what happened with the Articles of Confederation. They're gone.
They appealed to the Declaration of Independence, one of the founding documents, to legitimize what they did. So now that means the precedent is already established, so why wouldn't they do the same thing now?
Exactly.
You think about a state legislator, all right, talking to you, and we're only going to go in here to make sure the government can't overspend, and we're going to limit that. And somebody approaches him and says, how would you like $1 million in your pocket tomorrow? That's exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah.
And you find that a lot of them just wouldn't be able to resist the temptation.
Well, the ones that do resist the monetary temptations can be blackmailed or threatened. So it's they'll do whatever they have to get what they want. I know I
Yeah.
talked about that last week.
And the blackmail is a part of it, and that's something that's going to be released eventually. It's because
It's coming
the
out.
corruption that we have and the scandals we have are so massive that it's almost too much for the American people to think. It reminds me of what Dostoevsky was saying prior to the Russian Revolution. He was saying the Russian people will not be adequately prepared intellectually for what is going to be on them shortly, what you can see coming.
Yeah.
You seem to be in the middle of the same thing where people have been in a trance, and it's hard for them to break out of it and realize the scope of this or the necessity to do something. They really have to. They really have to.
Well, let's do a quick recap, if I can enlist the support of my producer here, if she's listening. I want to play a quick video, just a little recap of this memo that was released. And by the way, there are other memos coming out. So this is going to be a systematic, ongoing takedown of the criminal cabal that has been running our government. And what you're watching is history in the making. Well, not this video per se, but what's happening with Trump and the government and the military intelligence community that is backing Trump. You're seeing the systematic takedown of the deep state, which is the criminal elements that have taken over, have executed a coup, if you will, over time, and we are about to flush them down the toilet. We're draining the swamp. Hopefully this is going to, that'll be the outcome. So let's take a look.
Citizens of the world. Most lawmakers are outright refusing to discuss a classified 4-page memo relating to the FBI abusing FISA to spy on President Trump. But Representative Goody has refused to be silent. And he just dropped a bombshell that is terrible news for Robert Mueller. While speaking on Fox News Sunday, Goody hinted at what is in the memo that he has read. Goody didn't directly state what was in the memo, but he dropped several clues. He stated that anyone who is interested in knowing who paid for the infamous Trump-Russia dossier, or about whether or not it was used in court proceedings, that the release of the memo would be of great interest. Goody asked rhetorically, "Do you want to know that the Democratic National Committee paid for material that was never vetted, that was included in a court proceeding?" He also alluded to the idea that the primary source of the court proceedings had a bias against Donald Trump and his campaign, and that they said they would do anything to keep him out of office. Goody didn't name any names, but it could very likely be Christopher Steele, the former British spy who wrote the dossier. Steele was hired by Fusion GPS, who in turn were paid $1 million by the Clinton campaign to produce the Trump-Russia dossier. As reported by the Daily Caller. In an interview on Fox News Sunday, Goody posed several questions to host Chris Wallace and his viewers that hinted at the allegations in the memo, which could be released by the House Intelligence Committee as early as this week. If you think your viewers want to know whether or not the dossier was used in court proceedings, whether or not it was vetted before it was used, whether or not it's ever been vetted, if you are interested in who paid for the dossier, if you are interested in Christopher Steele's relationship with Hillary Clinton and the Democratic National Committee, then, yes, you will want the memo to come out, Goody told Wallace. Do you want to know that the Democratic National Committee paid for material that was never vetted, that was included in a court proceeding? He asked rhetorically. Do you want to know whether or not the primary source in these court proceedings had a bias against one candidate? Do you want to know whether or not he said he'd do anything to keep that candidate from becoming president? Goody's reference to a source who said they opposed Donald Trump is unclear, though he would seem to be talking about Christopher Steele, the former British spy who wrote the dossier. Steele had been hired by Fusion GPS, an opposition research firm that was paid $1 million by the Clinton campaign and DNC to investigate Trump. Democrats are clearly terrified about the release of this memo. Democrat group, Justice Democrats even went so far to send a letter to the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee calling the release extremely reckless. While it is unsure when it will be released, it is very likely to happen this week. We will keep you updated on any developments on this story.
All right, so there you have that's a little bit of an old recap. So what we know now is that the memo came out, and indeed, this memo was paid for by the Hillary Clinton campaign and the Democratic Committee. They hired a guy, Christopher Steele, former British intelligence agent, to fabricate this memo, which they did. They did not vet the memo, and they used that memo to seek a FISA warrant, which FISA is the kangaroo court that was created for government to be able to seek the ability to spy on people, foreign and domestic, without having to tell the American people or without having to be held accountable by law. They created this FISA court so that they could have their secret little commission to be able to do something that is unlawful, illegal, and unethical. So and at times maybe there is a need for that sort of thing. But again, whenever you put stuff behind closed doors, what you find is that the criminals run wild with their any abilities that you give them. So then we also know that, so we know it was Hillary Clinton paid for, it was fabricated. They used it against Trump to spy on him and his administration. They started out with spying on just one guy, which gave him a segue in there to get more information and say, hey, go back to the FISA court, broaden the expansion of the spying. It started back during the, this whole thing started right after Trump won the nomination from the Republican Party, and has been going on ever since.
Yeah.
And how much airtime has the media given this whole Russian thing? Everywhere from comedians to sitcoms to talk shows to
Right.
news programs. They have been beating this drum nonstop like a drone for the last year and a half, because they're all told to. And all the while, the people behind the scenes knowing that this was a criminal act, and it was made up and fabricated. And then you have people at the top of the FBI like Comey who participated in this fraud. And then you have McCabe, who was deputy director under Comey or after Comey, I'm not sure which. But he and his wife worked at Fusion GPS, and Fusion GPS was the media conglomerate company that they're basically a propaganda company, and they helped acquire this fabricated document from Christopher Steele.
Is this the same guy that did PP-Gate? Where Trump was doing somersaults with a couple of painted women on a mattress?
I don't
in,
know. I'm not sure. I can't.
Moscow, where Obama and Michelle
Another fabricated
had
story.
one time
yeah.
slept.
So
Like, we're gonna
basically,
believe that.
this entire fraud is now public, and of course, the liberal media or the leftist media, however you want to call them, the propaganda media, is doing everything they can to avoid it or to marginalize it, and to not report on it as though it's fact. They report on it as though it's the Republicans trying to take down the Democrats. Blah blah.
So they're
blah.
complicit in the fraud then?
They are.
They're complicit.
They absolutely are.
Yeah.
They always have
And
been.
there should be legal recourse for that. It's a criminal act as far as I'm concerned. And it probably is. There probably is going to be some criminal charges for that.
Well, there's some new information that's going to be coming out regarding, I'm pretty sure, regarding Scalia's death. Because that was talked about today by Jerome Corsi.
Right.
And, yeah, so, and that, who knows how that came about, but I think we're going to find out in the long run.
Well, some of those memos gave a 16-year plan for the total dissolution of the United States
Yeah.
between Obama, and then, of course, they thought for sure they had it in the bag for Hillary coming in.
I wish I had that
And,
chart to show everybody, because that was
that
an
is a phenomenal chart
eye-opener,
on what they wanted to do.
blow your mind chart, because it literally laid out
They destroy the United States military, get rid of anybody that was patriotic, and they did.
remove all patrons from government.
You get rid of 250 of our best generals, colonels, admirals, our very best people, overwhelm the country with immigrants.
That wasn't too obvious, Pat. He did that all at once. It took him about, 6 months to get rid of
They had a
200 generals?
They had a plan based on prior
Yeah.
experience with communist destructions of other nations. Is what they did. They're trained by communists.
Oh, yeah.
They were. Obama was brought up by communists.
Well, what they didn't expect is that purging of the military is what instigated our former and current military intelligence to plot out this counter coup, and they literally were considering a military coup, and then they decided to go with running Trump for president and getting him elected and following the path that we're on now. So thankfully we did, because it's a much calmer and more lawful path of action.
He saved it. He'll go down in history as probably one of the greatest, if not the greatest, president in American history, I think, with what he's done. If we're able to do this, but people have to realize it can't just be the President of the United States.
No.
You have to do what you have to do locally. You've got to jump on the bandwagon and do your part in the community.
Are we Americans? If we are, we got to show it.
Well, it's got to start in the schools. The schools have produced generations of people are totally cut off from any knowledge of their own history. They
Yeah.
don't understand anything about the history of this country or comparative histories.
What
It's unbelievable.
Ignorance is the problem,
What do we need from
Education is the remedy.
people of New Hampshire, Richie?
The people of New Hampshire, they have to stand up and understand, well, first of all, they have to educate themselves as to what's going on. And I strongly recommend people watch the show next week because watch the show next week. Watch all our shows, actually, but next week I think is important. Start getting involved with groups that have well-meaning intentions. And I'm not going to name any right now because
Get rid of the NEA, clean up education, get some real principals, get some real
Exactly.
department heads. If they're for
Exactly.
Common Core, you want to get rid of them. They should have stood up to a man and to a woman right across this country when they assaulted these kids, intellectually, morally, and ethically. They should have had the largest walkout in the history of the United States of America, and I'll tell you, they failed miserably. There was a handful that you can see that stood up against it. So we're not going to damage kids.
it should be everybody. What's going on now is criminal to your children. They're coming out of school. I don't want to insult people, but they're coming out of school and they really know nothing. And when I was in school, at least I learned something, but I was also ignorant. I wasn't taught, or I didn't pay attention maybe enough, I don't know. Pat certainly learned his history, or maybe he loved it more than I did, and it shows. But the point I'm trying to make out is simply that we all have to start understanding that what you are living in isn't the real deal. You're living in a matrix, and you're on the wrong side. We are on the wrong side.
We didn't have a lot of history in school. When I was in school, I was frustrated because as a little kid, I wanted to learn. I wanted somebody that really knew and had studied and was committed to it, and it didn't exist. And most of what I learned on my own. And that's true in college also. I would have fired half the college professors I had. I'll tell you right now, I certainly would have.
Well, you were dedicated, Pat, and you learned a lot. I mean, I admire you for your background in history, and you've taught me a lot. So I'm grateful for that.
I had a passion for it. I liked it, and then once the light bulb goes on, then it pretty much stays on. That would be the same for any of these young people. What a great thing to immerse them in, especially for kids that are having a hard time. And I've taught kids like that and say, we never thought there was anything like this available. It's just absolutely unbelievable. It's a place, a safe harbor for them to go to intellectually and even emotionally. It puts them on the right course. They become a decision maker. They can use logic. They've been attacked. They've been attacked through a lot of this stuff, and the damage really
I'll
shows.
tell you from somebody who's, I don't want to say I'm a dummy, but certainly been in a coma most of my life, and I'll be the first one to admit it. But when you start reading history and understanding history, you get into some critical thinking. And,
Betcha.
you know, whether or not you have all the facts down exactly or not, you start to understand what's happening to the country, and you have a tremendous, tremendous insight. I don't have what Pat has, but I'm learning. And that's what me and Dean on this show, and Pat, are encouraging people to learn.
We tried.
It's so important.
They used to teach logic. They used to teach logic in high school, and then mathematics was also a function of teaching logic. Then you watch the Common Core thing, where they started that, and they come up with crazy things like 2 and 2 is 8, and if the group says that that is the answer, that becomes the answer. So they're teaching them there are no absolutes. You can't be sure of anything except what we tell you is reality from moment to moment. And it took away from their ability to become decision makers. It's the same with postmodernism. You create an individual that cannot participate in the political process through that type of education. So it's not an accident. It's something that people need to sit down and they need to rectify. The parents have to have a say on curriculum. The schools have to compete with each other. And this
Maybe-
idea of centralizing this whole function, to me, is for the birds.
What I wanted to say, Pat, is, and I don't know if this is true, I haven't checked it out, but I've heard that they stopped teaching cursive handwriting in the school systems. I don't know if it's true, but if it is,
No, they did stop.
I suspect that the reason is they don't want our children to be reading the founding documents from 200 years ago because they weren't printed on a computer. They were written in cursive. You got to be able to read it. Now, if you don't have the ability to read cursive handwriting, how the hell do you know what it says?
I was driving down the highway last week. There's this guy in a Mercedes, and he has this fish on the back of his car in chrome. It's like the symbol of Christianity, but then it had little legs on it and a tail, and it says Darwin. And the sticker over here said Yale. And I says, you know something? Isn't that appropriate that somebody from the Ivy League would have that utter rubbish on the
his
back
car,
of
yeah.
their car, something that is, you want to talk about a witch science, but that, it's still in the texts, in the schools,
Yeah.
absolutely unproven, just total nonsense. There's no factual background for any bit of that whatsoever. But it's also the basis for the mentality for this ruling class that we have, that they think that they are the fittest, they've survived the conflict, and they are the fittest, and that government is their own private plaything. They deserve to be in charge and to rule. You do have a ruling class. We mentioned that earlier when we talked about the Russians, the way they look at us, and they loathe what we have for a ruling class in this country.
Yeah, educationally, the ruling class, for 200 years, at least in America, have been going like this. And they've been feeding our children, or us, education that is bringing us down like this. They're to the point now where they understand everything that's happened.
Right.
They're the master chess players that are playing on a multi-level chessboard, and we're sitting here playing checkers.
That education is totally different for the elites. It's real,
absolutely.
Real education.
Absolutely.
They teach corporate structure. They teach philosophy. They teach military history. They teach all of those things so you get an accurate assessment of human nature. And then the rest of us, what do they stress? Not too terribly much. They've cut off all the history.
2 plus 2 is 8, Pat. You just said it.
Common Core cut off all of the history standards. There's just no knowledge at all. It's like you might as well live in the Soviet Union and read short course, which is the official level of knowledge that you're going to have. You're taught to the test, and that's it.
Yeah.
That's the end of it. Oh.
Well, we're going to be drones. They want us to be drones, so why not just learn
Well, that's the
the
next-
basics, and we'll just be the little worker bees.
That's the next part of it, is the transhuman agenda. And you look at these kids are all attached to this thing. It's like this. Constant. You might as well take duct tape and put it on their head and attach it to the side of their
Yeah,
head.
they'll all have brain tumors in a couple of weeks. Yeah, no, you're right.
This guy, Alexander Dugin, is a guy to listen to, because he'll talk about the transhumanist agenda, and he'll mention that it's the natural in place that came from Lenin and the Russian Revolution. And I thought about that. You know, thinking back to about 1920, I saw a poster from that time period, from the Russian Civil War. And what it showed was a big poster, okay, part of their massive propaganda campaign. It had a Russian young Russian soldier he had the Budyanovka with the point in the red star in that. He was bayoneting a priest on the ground, an Orthodox priest, and underneath his arm he had 2 books, and one of them said the sayings of Lenin. And you know what the other one said?
Couldn't
In
guess.
class with Pat, they could guess. Technology. Imagine that. Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So it's followed all the way on through.
Just one editorial comment. The guy you want to listen to is Pat Murphy. Extremely knowledgeable in history. He's the guy you want to listen to.
Good carpenter, hire me.
Oh, yeah. So I just want to say, for those that want to follow the QAnon phenomenon, there's a really unique thing happening here. When QAnon started posting back in October, a number of YouTubers, they started to collaborate. They were separate YouTubers. They were just people who do their own independent news organizations, the alt media, so to speak. But it generated like this movement of people starting to collaborate to decipher this QAnon information that was coming out. And Jerome Corsi is one who got involved. Now, Jerome he's in Washington D.C. and he's been a reporter for a very long time, and he's known Donald Trump for a very long time. He's also had some intelligence background, so he knows how to read these QAnon posts and understand them a lot better than some of us regular folks. But I want to introduce you, or give you this YouTube channel that. The unique thing about this is they're running this intelligence channel. It's basically like an intelligence gathering operation, and they are running it 24/7. From what I can tell, there's about 8, maybe more volunteers, 8 to 12, that are on this thing, and Jerome Corsi comes on probably several times a day, and basically they will gather information, feed him information. They're collaborating on pulling together the things that are happening. I remember Jerome Corsi saying this morning, he says, if I work 20 hours today, I'll still be behind. There is so much happening right now. And so this is a great channel to just check out. And Kirsten, if you're listening and you want to just show this channel real quick, but I'll read it to you. It's by a group called #WeThePeople 24/7 Patriots Soapbox Stream. That's the channel name, and the actual page that's up, it says the title of this particular video, so to speak, but it's a 24/7 stream. Is We're Back Up, #WeThePeople, Patriots Soapbox 24/7, live stream, Q/storm coverage 24 hours a day. So, and it's fantastic because they're also receiving tons of information from some of the people that are posting on this channel live throughout the day. So when Jerome, and it's fascinating to watch, Jerome Corsi will ask a question, somebody will make a comment based on what they know, and then they'll see somebody in the comment section come up with information, and then they'll go look at that, and then they'll find it. So it's like this, it's like citizens intelligence apparatus going on here. It's fascinating. I mean, I just think it's amazing that, that's an example, like Richie's talking about. If you take action, we the people are standing up to this tyranny and the corruption by just getting involved in things to actually run interference, to provide resistance.
This internet has saved the country.
It totally
what was
has.
going to be used against the average man and woman in this country has become, to a certain extent,
Empowerment tool.
a positive thing,
Yeah.
and has helped us to acquire the knowledge we need. Because if we didn't have this, forget it. Imagine who'd be in the White House right now. Well, you'd probably be carbonized because the Russians put 50 million people in bunkers, and their subs are right off your coast if she got in.
You just raised a good
I don't
point.
think we'd even be here right now.
And I wanted to mention it real quick. For the people in New Hampshire that want to stand up, I should say right here in Manchester, because the only ones that are going to see it, House Bill 1778, sponsored by Dick Marple, I believe is going to be acted upon tomorrow. So tonight, those of you who are watching, look up who your state rep is, get their phone number, first thing in the morning, call them, and tell them to support that bill. It's going to put $200 million back in the pockets of you and I, not the state. And it's where it belongs. And just think about this. Dick took a lot of time, and there isn't enough time here to talk about it, but the $200 million that's going to be put in your pocket, you can stimulate the hell out of the economy in New Hampshire with that money. Giving it to the state, it's dead, lays dormant. And you don't have to pay the money that I'm talking about, but like I say, it's complicated. It has to do with a driver's license. You don't need one unless you're driving a commercial vehicle, or a car registration, or any of that other stuff. It's supposed to be House Bill 1778. I wouldn't steer you wrong, but you got time tonight to look it up before you talk to your rep. Thank you.
And for those of you who still think, or for those of you who have been propagandized to think that we the people paying taxes to the government is a way to stimulate the economy, which of course Nancy Pelosi would tell you it is.
Yeah.
You're wrong.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
it's proven fact.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah,
you
the zero-sum concept is a Marxist concept. We
it's
know
a
that.
ridiculous
But you don't,
notion, and
don't
there's,
teach that in
there's no
school.
fact involved in that
Yeah.
statement at all. In fact, there's plenty of history to show
Right.
that
Right.
you stimulate the economy by keeping the money in the hands of the people,
Yeah.
not in the hands of the government. And not only that, but we've gone over it a number of times on this show, but a lot of the money that government collects from us, or the money that they get through the various means, they store it away and stash it away, and they have it in their CAFRs, their comprehensive annual financial reports, which
Right.
we never get to see. Well, you can
Right.
see them a few years back, but most people don't know about them. Most people in government don't even know about it.
Yeah.
And it is the size and the amount of funds that are available at the state level, county level, municipality level, federal level is huge compared to what they talk about in regards to a budget. The budget is a bullcrap distraction, and the true money exists in the CAFRs. So,
Right. As a state, as a corporation, a
yeah.
corporate entity.
So keeping
Yeah.
the money out of the hands of the state is a noble idea, and is a win for we the people.
So what kind of solutions do we have
Make sure you can
to
read
the
this.
problem? We've got to get more people involved now.
Yep.
They got to talk to their families. For a lot of them, that's going to be like the
You
guy
gotta-
letting out a fart at the prom.
You got to educate yourself, and you got to put some time in. You can't ignore these issues that are going on. Now, you can ignore them, but you're going to be faced with some serious stuff coming up. And by the way, as was I said earlier in the show, this systematic takedown of the deep state that is being executed right now is not assured. There is no assured outcome to this thing.
Right.
These guys are attempting to do various things. There's been numerous attempts at false flag events that have been thwarted. Take,
Right.
for instance, that bullcrap fake media report on the Hawaii having a guy that accidentally turned on the
Yeah.
missile.
NORAD system.
Yeah,
right.
the missile, incoming missile system for 30 minutes. Yeah, right. No, that was a real missile, and it got shot down by the Navy. And that was an attempt to start World War III. And of course, they would have told you that North Korea somehow did that,
Right.
which is a bunch of crap too. More fake
Right.
news. But the fact is that you got to get involved at whatever level you want to get involved, and you got to educate yourself. So you got to start looking. You got to spend time on it every day. And the outcome is, I have a more positive outlook on what's going on than I've ever had in the past, because we're winning and we're winning and we're winning on a lot of levels. But these guys are crazy, they're psycho, they're evil, and they'll do anything they'll kill the world, they'll destroy the world if they can't win. And they would, and that type of playground bullshit, bull crap, where people will take their ball and go home, or ruin the whole game because they can't win. So it's the same thing.
Evil will triumph when men of good conscience stand by and do nothing. It's
These are
that simple.
not idle words.
Think about this, especially all you baby boomers out there.
2 minutes.
Back when we were kids, you used to watch the Westerns. The good guys conquered the evil. That was the message that we were sent. Good guys always win. Well, the good guys can still win. There's more of us than there are of them. We just have to stand. With that, I want to tell everybody, please watch the show next week. I believe it's one of the best we've ever done. We haven't done it yet, but I believe it's the best, and we'll prove why next week.
It's like Dietrich Bonhoeffer said, inactivity in the face of evil is evil itself. People are going to have to confront that. You're going to defend your kids, defend your families, and defend everything that's good in this nation, because it's been under assault. And this is a crucial time. It's a battle for our
2018.
really for our survival.
What's
Yeah.
the quote about, and I think it's quote about, it's easy to be a patriot when the cause is won. Then everybody will be a patriot, but it's tough to be a patriot when the cause is not yet won. Do you know that quote?
No, not familiar with
I knew it at
it.
one time, but
All right, fail. I don't have it.
they need to educate their kids.
That's all right. Thank you for Pat
I'm
Murphy
going-
coming on board. Remember the NationalLibertyAlliance.org. If you can give money to them for these books, please do.
You got anything?
And remember Jerry Delemus, please.
Create a new anti-left generation. Educate your kids. If you're going to do it at home, do it. Just do it. The information is there. Question evolution.
Yeah. Get in touch with us on the email address on the screen. We'll try to help you with directing you to educational material.
So once again, if you want to check out the Q-Anon, it's called #WeThePeople. This is on YouTube. You would have to search this channel on YouTube. And that channel is called #WeThePeople 24/7 Patriots Soapbox Stream. And you can just listen in on what's going on. It gets boring at times, but then they usually do like hourly. They'll do like an update of things going on. And then when Jerome Corsi comes on, it becomes super fascinating because he just articulates the whole thing that's going down now. So there's new memos coming out. There's going to be historic and massive upheaval of some of the things that are going on. And when they start getting to the point where they start releasing some of this pedophile stuff, you're going to be shocked out of the core. Yeah, it's coming down the pike to a government elitist near you. So, all right, so that's about it for today. Anything else, guys?
Nope, there's people in New Hampshire that's going to get it too.
Oh yeah, there's.
It's coming.
It's not just the federal level; it's all the way down to the local. So thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you watching. Hope you'll subscribe and check us out next week. So thank you. Have a great week.
Thank you. Good night.